2026 has been an amazing year at the box office so far, with some movies dominating and making a lot of money, but I'm not here to talk about those. Box office bombs are bound to happen. Once a movie loses hundreds of millions of dollars, the stink never really leaves it, but I pride myself on forming my own opinion, so I decided to watch the 10 biggest box office bombs of all time, adjusted for inflation. I went off the Wikipedia page, which has a section of estimated losses. Let's waste no time. I'm hopeful that we will find some gems in here. Mars Needs Moms was made for a budget of $150 million. The worldwide gross was $39 million, leading to an adjusted estimated loss of $143 to $206 million. Couple of notes about these figures. The budget and gross are not adjusted for inflation, then the budget is only the production figure, not counting marketing, which is why so many of these have a bigger losses than is implied by just the budget and the gross. Lastly, for admin, I'm going in ascending order based on the peak of the estimated loss. Mars Needs Moms about a matriarchal society on Mars that needs to kidnap the best moms on Earth, including Milo's mother. He secretly boards their ship and goes to Mars with them. Once there, he needs to team up with Gribble, a man who came to Mars in the same way decades ago, one woman alien and the enslaved men of Mars, to save his mom. They do manage to save her and overthrow the supervisor, so they no longer need to kidnap moms. Also, Gribble falls in love with an alien for some reason. It was about 15 minutes into this movie that I realized what I was signing up for with this video. Before this, I was loving movies and having a great time watching good ones, though my goal with this changed to finding the gems. I might have to sit through some less than stellar movies. Bad ones tend to lose money, but there has to be something in here to appreciate. Now, Mars Needs Moms isn't that bad, if I can be honest. By no means is it good, nor did it spark joy in me. The movie's biggest crime is just how generic it is, and that it feels passionless. Nothing here felt like it was made by a dedicated artist who loved what they were doing. It doesn't have that movie magic feeling. The story was bland, the main kid was annoying and hard to attach onto, the mother was a placeholder without a personality. There are several scenes pumped full of exposition where the movie can't be bothered to trust its audience. Then there is Gribble. I hate this dude. Every line is awkward and unfunny. Then he has the shallowest love arc in any movie ever. There is zero chemistry between him and this alien. Not all movies need to have a romantic love story in them, and this is definitely one that didn't. The emotional space could have been used on him as a mentor for Milo, one where he learns to teach. But nah, he had to fall in love with the alien. It wasn't even like a hot alien. What's the point in an alien love story where the alien isn't hot or cute or anything? The alien designs are just so gross and weird, as emotionally huskless as the rest of the movie. Then the overall look of this is fine, I guess. I don't want to say it looks bad, just not good again. The mixing of motion capture and animation don't really work together into anything positive. I thought this came out way sooner than it did. I was talking to a friend my age and he said he remembers seeing this in theater. I thought, no way, this had to have come out in 2006, and there's no way you watched this when you were 3 in theaters. Then I checked and this came out in 2011? Excuse me? Kung Fu Panda 2, From Up on Poppy Hill, Rango, and Rio all came out the same year as this. Put any of the animation from those movies next to Mars Needs Moms, and it will feel outdated and empty. I did have to text my mom to ask her for the Disney Plus login to watch this. She then asked what I needed it for, and I just folded inward with embarrassment. I considered lying, because who wants to have to tell another adult that you're gonna watch Mars Needs Moms? I get why this made no money. To evaluate if these should have been bombs, I will be debating if I would have been satisfied if I bought a movie ticket to watch this in theater. My recent trip to the theater cost me $7 for my ticket to the Odyssey. I would not have found this to be a worthwhile use of $7, but I also can't fully bring myself to hate this one because it's just a bunch of nothingness. Other than Gribble, who sucks. The movie was just not good, which is different than awful. Battleship's production budget was a whopping $209 to $220 million. It grossed $303 million, leading to an estimated loss of anywhere from $81 to $210 million. This is the highest grossing number we will see, which is exciting. None of these other movies touched $300 million, which helps pull it down to where it is only the 9th biggest bomb. Alex joins the Navy in an attempt to get his life together and ends up working his way up the ranks while he dates the daughter of an admiral. Everyone agrees Alex's laid-back attitude keeps him back from moving any further up the totem pole. An alien species comes to Earth and puts a massive force field around Hawaii, and the carrier ship's there. People die and Alex ends up in charge of one of the boats, and everyone has to work together to unleash the full might of the American military. Boats, planes, bombs, and guns to defeat the aliens. Yay, America. I love board games so much that I've designed one myself. However, We did not need or want this. Nobody asked for a film adaptation of the board game Battleship. I have some board games that have some lore and could make for a decent movie. Games like Dead of Winter, Pandemic, Small World, all have meat on their bones that could make a solid movie. That is just from my relatively small collection. People who play more games than me would be able to point out a lot more, but Battleship, the game with nothing to mine out and no reason to put a narrative to? Fuck off. Clue has a narrative to it, a hook. I'm just blown away at the audacity of this movie deciding to adapt a silly game without much there. I really didn't enjoy my time with this movie. It was an absolute slog to get through. One likable character, muddy action, and some flat acting. This was led by Taylor Kitsch. Who is that? A guy with no charisma or gravitas to him. Everything he did felt fake, like he never melded into the character and was just copying other actors who have done the wildcat turned military commander. I'm thinking about his performance next to Ben Affleck's in Armageddon, for example. Ben had range and charm. Taylor is plain and doesn't give all that much. Rihanna was in this and she was not good. Not even Jesse Plemons could give this a good performance. Everyone is overly self-serious and it doesn't come off in the best way. None of the actors meld together. Then the action is boring as hell as well. I sit here racking my brain trying to remember any specific action moment. I remember there were ships and vague naval/air combat. The movie really loses me in this overtly pro-American military action that serves no entertainment purpose, but does feel a need to show off how great the military is. If a movie is going to feature military in such a positive light, I need it to be way better than this one. If your movie ends with a bunch of dudes in suits getting awarded medals and a big military celebration, you are starting behind the 8 ball and need to make up that ground, something Battleship didn't care to ever do. This is a miserable watch. Under no circumstances would I be satisfied if I paid $7 to watch this. They could have paid me $7 and I would not have found this worth my time. I've talked about 453 movies on this channel and Battleship ranks in the bottom 10 I've talked about. Strange World's production budget was $180 million, while it grossed $73 million, making an estimated loss of $195 to $217 million. You might be able to argue this one was affected by COVID, however, by November 2022, the box office wasn't this bad. So this is an outlier even amongst the year-end movies, so it more than qualifies to be on this list. Strange World is about the Clods. Grandpa Yeager has been lost in the underworld for decades and is a big adventurer. Father Searcher is a farmer who discovers a power source their civilization runs on. Then their son is Ethan, who is more so interested in conservation, taking things from his father and his grandpa. The entire family goes on an adventure to find why the land they've been living on is dying. Tons of arguing happens. They find the landmass they've been living on is a giant creature that is breathing. Ethan gets his wish and they heal some of the generational trauma, and he is allowed to explore his own world more. This was the first of 2 rewatches for me. What sticks out this time was just how little of this I remembered from the first time I watched it. I remembered the generational trauma, but none of the specifics around why they went on the adventure or the twist at the end, which speaks to my feelings on the movies overall. Just kind of bland and forgettable. This movie is the best we have talked about yet, for sure. I finished it and had a content time overall, but it doesn't stick with you. Every part of this is solid but not great. The story, characters, theming, jokes, thrills. I am not able to find a single part of this I would call bad. However, I can't point to anything it excelled at. That is the problem with a lot of these, and that will make itself clear. Being a box office bomb isn't just about doing nothing wrong, but instead about what you have to do right. The best part of this was the world building. The setting was tons of fun, dropping hints that this land was alive. It was colorful and filled with little guys. Splat is great. I love this little guy. A fun little blob with arms and legs. Tons of other super innovative and well-designed creatures. I am such a sucker for cute little guys in movies. That movie maxed out on all of those, so that is positive. Battleship was a movie made out of a board game, and this movie had a board game that Ethan played. I think it's a missed opportunity not to make this into a little collectible thing and release a board game. You're Disney after all. You can release a real board game based on one of your movies. However, the rest of this was a little soulless, even down to Jake Gyllenhaal's voice acting. The passion just wasn't there for this, and I think it showed itself. I wouldn't have been upset to spend $7 on this, but if I spoiled myself and bought some popcorn, then I would have found this not worth it. Sinbad Legend of the Seven Seas production budget was merely $60 million. It grossed $80 million and had an estimated loss of $219 million. This is our third animated movie so far. You might be thinking this list is going to be filled with these, but Sinbad is our final one. Just had to front load them, I guess. Sinbad and his crew decide to go on one last heist before retirement. The book he wants to steal is protected by his childhood best friend, Protus. Sinbad is tricked by the goddess of discord, Eris, into helping her steal the book. Everyone thinks it was Sinbad and he is sentenced to death. Protus is the one who believes in him and offers himself up to take the punishment as Sinbad tries to regain the book. He feels pressured to help his friend and travels the seven seas to get the book. Also on the journey is Protus's fiancée, Marina. Once they do travel the world, Eris gives Sinbad one last chance to be selfish and he denies, causing her to return the book due to some kind of pact I don't fully understand. Everyone loves Sinbad and he ends up in a relationship with Marina. Why are we pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into a Sinbad movie? Let's be real. Who knows anything about Sinbad except for the fact that he is a pirate? He's not an IP worthy of dumping money into. The return on investment is risky at best. This is one of our only movies where it grossed more than it cost. They just spent too much in other parts. Also, the slate of movies this was around did not help it at all, going up against Finding Nemo and The Height of the Pixar Machine. Then a week after this hit theaters, Pirates of the Caribbean Curse of the Black Pearl came out and cut any legs this movie could have had out from under it. Similar themed pirate adventure movies, one a traditional 2D animation and the other a massive blockbuster live action movie that centered around some big movie stars. The choice was clear for many moviegoers and families. They were gonna go see the pirate movie everyone was talking about and not Sinbad. I can't say I blame people for not going to see this one. A generic action plot, fine animation but having some rough edges. Sinbad is straight up sexist at the start of this, then he falls in love with the woman he talked down to for so much of the runtime. Just makes for a slightly awkward watch. Although I will say the other pirates don't subscribe to this belief. The action is fun, just not fun enough. The true height of the movie is Eris, the goddess of discord. The lack of impact this movie had is so apparent because when people talk about attractive animated characters, nobody brings her up. But more than that, she did feel like a real threat. She's a god, makes the mountain of trouble Sinbad got himself into feel even harder to overcome. Their interplay and rivalry was great. She was a scary presence throughout. The movie was solid and I think it could entertain a kid pretty well. However, as an adult with different film taste, it was fine. I would have checked out very early on if I wasn't watching this for a video. I would not have spent $7 to watch this one. Cutthroat Island's production budget was $98 million. It grossed a pathetic $18.3 million, leading to estimated losses of $222 million. Morgan Adams inherited part of a map to a buried treasure on Cutthroat Island. The other pieces are held by her uncles who can't get along. To read it, she needs someone who can speak Latin. This is where conman William Shaw comes in, who they need to break out of prison. The two start a romance while out there on the seas, and there's tons of treachery. They get to the island, all kinds of pirates adventure, and a giant boat battle goes on. Adams, Shaw, and the crew defeat her uncle and the royal attack dogs sent to them, and get the treasure from Cutthroat Island. They retire to Madagascar. This is two remarkably similar movies back to back on this list, a pirate adventure across scenes where the main two characters fall in love despite their infighting. I just find it odd how much these two line up with each other. The audiences don't know anything. Critics and Letterboxd users don't know anything. This movie lost $222 billion, has a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 2.8 on Letterboxd. That is absurd because this movie absolutely rules. It comes down to the action and the adventure aspects of this. They spent $100 million on this movie and put it to the best use we have seen so far. They just blew stuff up, put everything into the action scenes, and it was felt. There's an intangible quality to practical filmmaking that I got while watching this. I was in awe of just how much was going on in this movie. The final battle jumping between the two boats and all the explosions is an all-timer action scene for stakes, setting, and badassness. They had to rely on practical filmmaking because the tech didn't exist in the way they needed to if they tried to use CGI. A lot of these movies on this list bumped up their budget due to CGI costs. It is nice to see a real fire can also cost an ungodly amount of money and that they were willing to spend the money on it. This was ahead of its time. This is a full 8 years before Pirates of the Caribbean and did the pirate adventure better than that movie in my opinion. It is colorful and silly as pirates should be. It's a genre film through and through, but a damn good one that operated on a level that had never and still hasn't been matched. I find it hard to understand why the reaction to this was as poor as it was and why we have not reclaimed this as a cult classic yet. When it was released, its distributor MGM was undergoing a sale, so they didn't fully put the marketing machine behind it, so it makes a little bit of sense that it wasn't as seen before. But now, how do people watch this movie and not realize it is the epic that it is? Spectacular filmmaking. I'll be singing this movie's praises for a while. I will say the story can get a tiny bit ever so slightly boring, but not that bad, and it plods for like a solid 5 or 10 minutes in the middle there, but that's fine. The acting is nothing to write home about. Just being a part of the movie, our two main actors didn't have much chemistry, but there was so much fire and epic destruction in this movie that I can overlook those aspects. This was never going to be an all-timer story. I'm okay with that because it filled its bucket in another way. I'm so happy Cutthroat Island was a part of this video. I needed one of these to be great. I was finding it hard to justify a video where I only say it's mid every single time. Cutthroat Island is my savior and a great movie you should go watch. It's on Tubi. Go watch this thing. You can do it. And see the utter destructive action in all its glory. This would have felt like a steal at $7. God, imagining watching this in a theater full of people all cheering and getting invested is amazing. That would be peak. Mortal Engine's production budget was $110 million. It grossed $83.7 million, leading to an estimated loss of $224 million. Mortal Engines is about roaming cities, these giant cars that basically have an entire city on them, and how the larger ones hunt down and capture the smaller ones. Hester Shaw, the woman with the mask, is the main character looking to get revenge on Thaddeus Valentine for murdering her parents. She teams up with a historian who works under Valentine to bring justice to their names and try and change the culture around the roaming cities. Based on the first 10 minutes of this, I thought we were in for another banger action movie. It opens with the bigger city, London, chasing down a small mining town, giving the scale of the London city, introducing us to this cool clash of post-apocalyptic steampunk tech. The chase felt frantic and exciting. The spectacle and world building in this one action scene is better than what a lot of movies can pull together in their entire runtime. I was excited to get to the rest of this movie after the opening scene. Then there is another 2 hours of movie I needed to sit through. It fell into the trap of having a very generic plot and not any other action scenes quite like that first one. These plot points had been done to death by 2018. They weren't bringing anything new or exciting to the post-apocalyptic genre. We meandered from average set piece to average set piece for the rest of the movie. We've gotten so many of these movies that felt so similar. This movie didn't use its hook well enough. The Hunger Games works as a post-apocalyptic movie because it leaned into the pitch of kids killing kids. The hook of Mortal Engines is City on Wheels. It should be this giant Mad Max style adventure full of these cities chasing each other, but we just don't get any of that after the opening scene. And there's a couple smaller moments in there where we also return to it, but we don't use the hook. Instead, we use planes, robots. They walk places in this. That is when the movie fell into mediocrity for me. The main character spent most of the movie closed off and emotionally hidden, making the movie harder to connect to. Then our secondary character, Tom Natsworthy, was annoying, with his overly goofy tone. I just couldn't take that character seriously at all, and any attempts at emotion from him didn't land with me. Then there's a scene in this that felt very similar to Cutthroat Island. Both the movies have a character named Shaw, and feature a scene of the character being sold into slavery when a pirate-like woman comes up and buys them, but it all ends up in a giant battle to save them. Watching a movie in isolation isn't possible. My thoughts on a movie will always be influenced by what I watched around it, either the day before or the day after even sometimes. I try not to let it affect things too much, but it is only natural. I sat here with Mortal Engines being reminded so much, so vividly of a movie I watched the day before and had a much better time with. Action that felt realer and didn't sludge the same way this movie's did. Made me dislike Mortal Engines a little more in comparison. If I watched these in a different order, this would not have been a problem, but I think this movie got a little unlucky, and I'm not faulting the movie for this. It's just a necessary bit of context to add to this review. I have to assume this movie bombed as hard as it did due to genre burnout, nobody caring about the source material, and its failure to elevate itself beyond the genre. This is why the movie never fully landed with me. I don't think it ever hit boring, but it got damn close a couple of times. I found myself not hating this, but realizing I could be doing anything else with my time. Much like Sinbad, Strange World, and Mars Needs Mom, I would have abandoned this at the 45-minute mark if it wasn't for this video. Lastly, would I spend $7 on this? No, and I didn't. The weekend this hit the box office, I went to the movie theater to watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, a much better use of $7. Young me had zero clue what Mortal Engines was, but I was more than happy to spend some time watching Peak with other people's money instead of Mortal Engines. The 13th Warrior's production budget was $100 to $160 million. It grossed $61.7 million. leading to an estimated loss of anywhere from $133 to $249 million. As the rule of the video states, I will be going with that higher number of $249 million, which is an awful lot of money to lose on a movie. It is about Ahmed, who is a poet but is exiled after the wife of a noble flirts with him. On his travel, he runs into the crew of 12 Vikings who have heard of a prophecy of them needing a 13th warrior to join them, who must not be Norse himself. They believe Ahmed is this warrior, and he reluctantly joins their journey to defeat some mythical ancient threat. They travel and train together, learn not to be racist, and defeat the force of evil. Ahmed vows to return home as a man of higher stature and a personal purpose now that he has a closer connection with God. My first thought after watching this is, how the hell did this cost anywhere near $100 million? And where did all that money go? Turns out the movie had a ton of reshoots and recuts that tacked onto its original $85 million price tag because people weren't liking it. They did test reactions and they just weren't good. They could have released the movie as is and taken a risk that way, considering the test reactions, or bring in the author of the book to direct the redos and pour on another $12 million into it. Well, they doubled down and decided to do the reshoots, and that is why this movie is here. Without the additional $80 million going into the budget, this doesn't turn out to be as big of a bomb as it was. Worst of all is you can feel this disjointed production. Halfway through, they switched directors, composers, the screenplay around, and the ending of the movie. It doesn't feel like one complete vision. A messy movie that never taped over itself and unified. The biggest example is in these action scenes. There is no consistent visual language or way they feel. The main character goes in and out of the ending of the movie. Some scenes he was just suspiciously not there, for moments where he definitely should have been there. This is where the reshoots start to negatively affect the movie, when you can feel different people trying to piece together what they can. Massive props to the editor here for making this as coherent as it was, with somebody probably breathing down their neck to make it better. I cannot imagine that would have been an easy job or position to be in. As I have talked about before, this is not the type of movie I love. Historical fiction set in a drab world surrounding religious and romantic conquests and journeys. I find it hard to enjoy spending time in these settings or with these characters. The movie doesn't do anything to separate itself from my negative connotation with the genre. I understand that's fully a me problem and could see how others who understand these religious undertones would have a better time with this. I have found myself unable to connect with a story that has a large chunk of it dedicated to the main character's relationship with God, but even these story elements don't get fully explored based on their need to move on to another uninspired action set piece. If they took the time to really dive into these elements, I do think I could see myself coming out on the other side. But all I had was the most basic exploration of these elements, so I couldn't really ever fully enjoy it. This is another movie on this list that doesn't fully capitalize on itself and its own potential. The movie wanted to feel grand but never got there, a mess of a production that turned into an ever so slightly bad movie. I still stand by that only Battleship has been awful, the 13th Warrior is at best fine, at worst dreadfully unengaging and messy, so I would not have felt like this was $7 well spent, and can understand why this movie didn't succeed in terms of the box office. The Marvel's production budget was $270 million. It grossed $206 million, leading to estimated losses of $205 to $250 million. It is about the aftermath of Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, killing the Supreme Intelligence. After a civil war destroyed the planet of the Kree, Dar-Ben comes into power and finds a quantum ban. Carol, Kamala Khan, aka Miss Marvel, and Monica Rambeau end up quantumly entangled and have to stop the Kree from stealing the natural resources of other planets. Through the power of friendship, they win and set up some future movies, as pretty much all these MCU movies do. I believe this is the first time I get to talk about the MCU properly, like having a full segment dedicated to one of its movies. Impressive that I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary of the channel, and I'm just now reviewing a movie from the biggest franchise out there. To review this one properly, I feel like I need to context my journey with the MCU and movies as a whole. My dive into movies as a regular watcher happened in 2022. Before that, I would watch maybe one a month, mostly a big franchise movie or Pixar. I used to be a big comic reader for a couple years. I was really into it. I've fallen out of a habit now. However, I was the prime person for most MCU output and enjoyed them. This of course peaked with Infinity War and Endgame. However, even after that, I was enjoying the output of the MCU. Now, as I started to really explore cinema more, you might assume I would grow tired of these old MCU movies. For every one I've watched, I have enjoyed recently. Most MCU movies are good in my opinion, up until their recent output, like very recent. On average, I was higher on Phase 4 than most. I think movies like Black Widow and Shang-Chi are better than some of Phase 1 and 2 movies like Captain America 1, Ant-Man, and Thor. There was a lot of hate coming into the MCU when I was standing there as a defender, even as I found more movies I loved. I still have 2 MCU movies in my top 50, maybe even 3. Then came the ultimate evil MCU movie in my mind, Deadpool and Wolverine, one of the worst movies ever made in its blatant corporate greed and unfunny nature, into Captain America: The Brave New World, which was pretty boring and another fall off. These 2 stinkers in a row, as I dove deeper into cinema, has taken a little bit of that passion out from me. It made me a little bit more sour on the MCU, but I still look back at those old ones with hope. I didn't love Thunderbolts, and I never even managed to get around to Fantastic Four. So the Marvel sits in a very interesting place, right before the downfall. It was the movie that came before Deadpool and Wolverine. I watched this movie. It's the last rewatch I had to do for this project, and I remember enjoying it, but it didn't stick out as particularly amazing. So what did I think of it this time around? I had a pretty fun time re-exploring this movie. Much like Strange World, I didn't remember it all that well. This time I found a ton of new nuggets I really enjoyed. The clear highlight was the interplay and fun between the 3 lead actors here, Carol, Kamala, and Monica, each having their distinct personalities, and them coming together was cute and the beating heart of the movie. This would have fallen apart without the charisma of these 3. Brie Larson and Iman Vellani showed a ton of personality and heart in their interactions. It got pretty cute. I do think Tiana Paris was underserved by the screenplay being the straight man who's supposed to be serious, and the character had to shell up due to that. She did a good job breaking through and adding humanity when she could, but there's only so much you can do with what she was given. So when these 3 talents were given the space to hang out and show their friendship, it really soared and was an amazingly cute time. I also didn't remember just how wacky this movie got, which is a massive positive in this movie's favor and makes it stand out compared to some other MCU movies. The planet where everyone sings was a really fun location for part of a superhero movie, particularly the part where Carol joins in the song and dance with light egging from the other 2. If you are going to set your movie in outer space and go to different planets, there's room to put your characters in fun situations such as this one. Another really fun scene was the cats wreaking havoc on the ship in order to save everyone. Such a fun and creative way to make a scene like this play out and make sense. However, the entire movie isn't rainbows and sunshines. The writing, particularly the villain, was pretty weak. I did not care for the Kree or their plight one bit. Dar-Ben was erased from my mind and had 0 impact. I do not remember her the first time, and she didn't stand out the second time. The movie suffers from the MCU villain problem big time of not being able to write a compelling one. Despite that, I had a pretty good time. It fills up a food group. There's room in my cinematic diet for these solid superhero movies every once in a while. I do think this stands up to most of the MCU library. Worse than the 10 best or so, better than the 10 worst. In the middle group of the MCU's output. Sure, I would have found my $7 well spent watching this. There wasn't much meat on its bone, but it kept me entertained and enjoyed. After editing, I need to come back and talk a little bit here. I was gathering footage for this, and it was kind of a surreal experience going through the top videos on YouTube about this movie. There's a 3-hour video about how this movie is a coffin for the MCU, a 5-hour one about how it is a complete disaster, videos out there calling the movie pathetic. These are adults who care so much about this movie that they put their time into making these hit pieces. These long hit pieces. That's absurd. Utter loser behavior. Go touch grass and let women make movies and exist, guys. Dear God, get real hobby and interests. You are why people make fun of people talking about movies on YouTube. The Lone Ranger's production budget was $225 to $250 million. It grossed $260, leading to an estimated loss of $221 to $263 million. Takes place during the western expansion of the railroads in Texas. Tonto, a Native American, has been outlawed from his people, and John, a Texas Ranger, is also there. John's brother and posse are killed by railroad tycoons. Tonto and John team up to take them down. John gets the mantle of the Lone Ranger this way. It's about American greed and the exploitation of the natives. Kinda, but it is mostly just a western adventure where Tonto and John save the day and ride off into the sunset. This movie is very funny if we kind of think about it. Like, the fact that this exists and that it was made with these people and I get to watch it, that's funny. It shouldn't exist. This movie shouldn't exist. Johnny Depp, notorious abuser and white man that falsely claimed he was part native, playing this big screen native. Then we also have another notorious abuser and wannabe cannibal, Armie Hammer, in it too. There's a line where Depp says the villain eats people and it makes him evil next to Armie Hammer. That's hilarious. Imagine what was going through his head there. Can you think of another movie where the 2 main actors have aged as poorly as this one? Maybe Baby Driver, but there aren't many out there that are really operating like this. Makes it even funnier that this bombed. Imagine if this movie came out today. Like, would it do even worse? Or would a certain type of people fueled to support this as an anti-cancel culture thing? Maybe these two being miserable sacks of shits could have helped make this some money, because nobody cared about it when it came out. The general shittiness of these two main actors did make it a little bit harder of a watch. It's just hard to stomach it, especially when there are people still supporting Depp for some fucking reason. But I tried to take as much of that feeling out of it as I could, because I realized there were other people who worked on this, and I'm not giving them money to watch this by any means. My notes on this are very similar to Mortal Engines. A great first action scene meanders in the middle in a boring way. However, unlike Mortal Engines, this has a fun final action scene as well. However, I managed to prefer that movie. This one just really drags its feet. He doesn't become the Lone Ranger until like an hour in. The middle section is just not entertaining. I have zero desire to see them bicker or go on these boring information gathering quests. This is 2.5 hours with mindless wondering. It's absurd. It brought itself in and out with cool action, but left the rest of the movie to flounder. The movie is seemingly pro-Native American and seems to sympathize with them. However, the main Native is played by a white dude, and Disney also banned a decent chunk of Native American journalists from seeing or covering the movie. So that basic layer of decency, any goodwill the movie manages to barely squeeze out of it, is destroyed by their actions. Somehow this movie got more problematic, which is not going to help with what was already a poor movie watching experience. Like, if everything was above board here, and there wasn't multiple abusers and the movie didn't punch down, I would still have had a bad time and not enjoyed this. What the movie gets right, aka the train action scenes, it gets really right. This is the biggest pattern I've seen from these bombs. Even if the movies are generic, they have at least one really solid action scene in them. This one had two. Shame it was too little of a percentage of the runtime to matter. I remember as a kid I was really into Disney Infinity for a while. When me or a sibling got money, we would buy a new Infinity set. For some reason, the mass market kid game has a Lone Ranger set. I didn't want this one back then, because why would I? It was the only one I couldn't care about. Why the hell would they market this movie to kids? The boring ass character of the Lone Ranger does not have the same mass market appeal as pirates do. The entire movie is a fever dream of something to have existed as it did. How did we let this happen? They were confident this was going to work, and that's why they pumped out the merch machine for it. It's so stupid I would not have spent $7 on this, and find it to be an utterly fascinating movie for how weird it is looking back. John Carter's production budget was $263 million. It grossed $284 million, leading to our biggest estimated loss of $157 to $280 million. 2012 was a really bad year for Taylor Kitsch at the box office, considering this is the second movie of his from that year on this list, the first being Battleship. He seemed to be box office poison. Hollywood really thought they had something with him and put the entire machine behind him, spending over $500 million on his movies in this one year, only to make almost none of it back. I cannot recall any other time where Hollywood went all in trying to make someone the next big thing only for it to utterly fail, quite like Taylor Kitsch. I can't say I blame people for not connecting to him, considering he was easily the worst part of this and pretty bad in Battleship. He's hardly worked in films since, only having a handful of credits. Sad to see he only cared about the fame and not the craft, but of course he only cared about the money. He made Battleship and John Carter. I'll be real, I'm over it at this point. This movie was not bad. It was not good. I can't keep making this interesting. The scene where he killed the gorillas was cool and had some fun world building in there, but I don't care. And nobody else cared either. The fun sci-fi elements do not make this a gem, but instead are tiny positives in the sea of nothingness that is this movie. I would not have paid $7 to watch this, or many of these. Why did I do this to myself? This video needs to serve as a reminder to me that my focus should be on good movies, ones I enjoy and want to discuss, or really bad ones have an occasional spot. Nothing is worse than a middling movie that doesn't have too much to talk about, and that's what John Carter is. So sorry about the big conclusion of this movie being, it's fine, but I just can't be bothered to talk about it. I don't know if I have some grand conclusion for this one, everybody. These movies are fine. One great one truly horrible one, and a bunch of middling stuff. What stuck out to me is how none of them have a reason to go watch this movie specifically. They are generic in their plots and most of their runtime, and I think that is what ultimately dragged a lot of these down into being a box office bomb and not making much money. The word of mouth wasn't, you gotta go see it, it was fine, I guess. Now time to rank them from worst to best. 10. Battleship. 9. The Lone Ranger. 8. Mars Needs Moms. 7. The 13th Warrior. 6. John Carter. 5. Mortal Engines. 4. Sinbad Legend of the Seven Seas. 3. Strange World. 2. The Marvels. 1. Cutthroat Island. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the movie. If you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe. It would help me out a ton. I'm on that journey to 300 subscribers. Next week's video will be another movie Jeopardy, so get excited for that. Leave a comment on any topics you would like to see me tackle next. Thanks for watching.